it is a very good practice to get more ownership of what you're building, because you're also seeing how users are behaving with it, and it gives you the perspective that you need to make the corrections or iterations required or needed to make it the best product out there.
Hi, I'm your host, Magali Pellissier, and I'm a product manager. Each week, I show you the other side of a product. I interview the people who contribute to making products a success. They are engineers, writers, marketers, support analysts, UX designers, or even salespeople. Not only will I give them the credit they deserve, but will uncover what makes a good product and product manager from their perspective. Over the next 3 weeks, I'm releasing special episodes in a roundtable format. Think about it like a friendly competition between PMs and their stakeholders. On one hand, a team of 2 stakeholders with the same role, for example, UX designers. On the other hand, a team of 2 product managers, including myself. There are 3 rounds, 1 per week, during which I give a word to start with, and each person shares the first word that comes to their mind when they hear it, and we discuss, debate, share our perspectives. At the end of each episode, we vote, and the person who came up with the best word wins a point for their team. There will be debates, battles, and hopefully alignment between PMs and their stakeholders. Stakeholder management is a key skill for product managers, so just as you are obsessed with listening to your customers, let's hear from your stakeholders. Welcome to this roundtable between product management and UX design. On the UX design team, I am pleased to welcome 2 of my previous guests, Pamela Sanchez and Hayden Chambers. In episode 6, my first UX designer representative in this podcast, Pamela, based in Colombia and working for Torre, talked to me about being a UX designer in a startup after having been a UX researcher for 2 years before that. In addition to being a creative soul, I was impressed by how she is very hands-on on user research and strategic activities, including road mapping. I then discussed with Hayden in the 12th episode about his role as a product designer at Echo Online. He's worked across a broad range of design disciplines, starting in design and advertising, but also interactive and web design. Through my interview, he's demonstrated a lot of empathy towards product managers, which he gained in various roles, including as a front-end developer and mentor. Those 2 episodes with Pamela and Hayden are amongst the most successful so far in the podcast. So if you've missed them, I recommend giving them a listen. In team product management, I am pleased to welcome for the first time Iryna Struck, a product manager at HandsHQ, where she's leading 2 SaaS products that empower companies to keep their high-risk teams safe. Being a true believer in the power of sharing ideas and building communities, Iryna organizes monthly Product Tank meetups in London, where professionals working in product come together to discuss the most interesting topics. I will be the second member of the team. I'm the lead product manager at RFI Global, a data and insights company. After a few years in the SaaS space, I took the leap for a challenge to build a startup within an established company and transform waterfall-style services into an agile product. I enjoy thinking holistically about the entire customer experience and creating work environments based on trust and openness, which is why I launched this podcast. So this is round 2 of our roundtable between product management and UX design. The UX design team won the first round with the words care and empathy. And we talked a lot about how we're sometimes cutting corners for MVPs and how we're sometimes not sure how to measure whether we built the right thing from a UX design standpoint. So one of the things we can use as a methodology to experiment is A/B testing. So I just want to clarify what A/B testing is. So it's kind of online controlled experiment where you put 2 versions of a main product. Your version A is the controlled one. So let's say the button is green and option B is the button is red, and you see which one achieves the better outcome. In that instance, it could be the click rate or something like that. So it's all automated and you do it on a lot of data. So first of all, just want to make sure everybody agrees.
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. So what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear A/B testing? Maybe Pamela, you start.
The first word that came to my mind, and maybe I'm being too abstract, but we'll see, is perspective. So I think that A/B testing is a key tool in the process of designing that gives you the perspective that you need to make the most informed decisions and get the best outcome.
Cool. Iryna, what do you think?
So I would probably go for unbiased opinion, just because A/B testing is a good way for us to gather as much information about how user behaves and how they really react to different things. And this will then help us better build our product strategy in the future. So I'll go for unbiased opinion.
Right. Hayden?
I'm going to go a bit against the grain on this one. My word is suboptimal. And that comes from A/B testing usually being in the product as opposed to any of the research phase or the testing phase. So I find that A/B testing is really good for finding local maximas, which is that shade of red better than that one? Or is that font size better than that one? And the end result is just optimizing to a very specific configuration as opposed to working out with metrics, which I think are incredibly important, what's actually going on with the product. So that's my word.
Very good. I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss on this one. I chose mature. And the reason for that is because I think this is a methodology that people talk a lot about, A/B testing and all that. And lots of companies would like to be doing it. But in practice, I wonder how many companies actually do that. And there's lots of reasons why people don't do it. But I've grouped that under the banner maturity. That some companies aren't mature enough to be doing that. So I think it's a bit linked to what you've said, Hayden, in the sense that you have to have that discovery/experimentation process set up in an optimal way, because otherwise, if you just do it at the end, you're wasting a lot of efforts. There could be so much more benefits to doing A/B testing than just waiting until the end. But some companies think they do A/B testing maybe when they do that, and maybe there's something bigger than just this. So I think the question first I want to ask everybody is, have you ever done proper A/B testing? Or am I kind of right in saying that we talk a lot about it, but we've never done it? And I'm going to start without any shame. I have never done it because, we didn't have the infrastructure. Like on the engineering side, we didn't have the capability. Then we added Launch Darkly to our stack, and we were able to do some feature flagging to change the different settings. But we didn't get to a stage where we were able to do that. So the only kind of testing like this that we did was actually earlier in the process when you had 2 designs, 2 prototypes, and you put it in front of users. But that's not automated. You get a smaller sample and all of this. Anyone's done it? Or?
Yeah, so I have a similar experience. So I have never done it really properly. We've done it on a website using one of the tools available online. So it wasn't like feature flagging and anything like that in product. So it's mostly like marketing A/B tests, which was interesting. But I think the problem was always getting enough traffic to really get the difference that you need to define whether this is something you'd go for or not. How about you guys?
I'm glad I'm not the only one that doesn't do it as often as we should be doing it. Actually, as Magali mentioned, it's something that is actually very uncommon. And I understand maybe, as Iryna brought up, that one of the reasons might be the traffic, like the amount of people that you have to decide if something was actually good or not, and if you have enough people to actually get reliable results. But in my company, we use a tool to track that can tell you if your result was valuable, good enough to consider as positive or not, because it's based on percentages. I've had other designers with me use it, and I recently did an A/B test for using 2 different wordings in a button, and we used half and half of the users for it, from the total users, and we got the result. It was an effort that was mainly controlled by engineering, so it's kind of weird because I knew about it, I helped in it, but I wasn't involved in getting the results from. It is indeed something uncommon, and I'm glad to hear that from you as well.
I think I might have been unlucky in the sense that any time it's been involved, it has been in place of a good process. And I think that sort of speaks to your point, Magali, about maturity of a company. So when it's used as a crutch, it's definitely going to end up painful. And the time that I used it, I ran into the same issue as Iryna. There was not enough confidence level in the sample size. So you've just then spent, a month, for example, waiting for a result, and you're still none the wiser. I could have gone and interviewed clients and had a smaller sample size, but a very rich sort of feedback. So that's the other part of it, is it's very hard to test sort of multiple things and understand what that user's doing. So it is unbiased in a way, but it's an unknowing kind of unbiased. It's a very blank state. You don't know whether it would just happen to be that at 9 o'clock in the morning, the red button just looks better than the green button, and at 6 o'clock at night, it's the other way around, and it happens to be that most people log in at 9. So there's a lot of nuance to it, and there's a lot of maths to it. And sure, like companies, Optimizely from Google, for example, was the one I used, I think. They do give you that statistical knowledge, but yeah, hopefully it's not used to replace other deeper processes.
Exactly. So I think around the maturity, the first thing is, do we have the stack to do it? Do we have any tool that lets us do it? Then who owns it? You raised that point, Pamela, when you said actually engineering owned it. So who owns it? Is it engineering? Is it design? Is it the PM? Or is it, because we're talking about making some small tweaks sometimes, which is why Hayden, you said it was suboptimal. Maybe it's the job of the growth product manager. And also, do those people have the skills to analyze? Because at the end of the day, it's a statistical method. It's not like you can just take the number and say, yeah, that's it. It's positive. Do you have analysts, maybe product analysts that could do that? Because I think that's part of being mature enough to run this kind of experiment.
In my case, indeed, the product growth manager is the one that is in charge of making sure that the result is optimal, and he's in charge of analyzing the number that the metrics result to decide if it was a positive or not outcome.
What about making bigger changes? So you said, Hayden, it's suboptimal. So we're not talking about the color of a button or the text on a button, but like proper user journey. Iryna, is this something that you would consider as a product manager to do? Because at the end of the day, as we said in the previous episode, you're responsible for also the delivery. So if that experiment takes a lot of time and a lot of effort from the teams, then maybe as a product manager, you decide, no, it's not worth it. I prefer interviewing 3 people, So what's your stance as a product manager?
The challenge here is that if you are testing entire user journey, there might be so many steps to it, and you will never know if you're testing the whole thing. That is different from so the control and test group are very different. You'll never know which step of the changes that you've done have actually affected the results and what really worked and what didn't. So I feel like it has to be very granular in a sense for you to be able to tell the impact that it might have done. And yeah, you're definitely right with the scope and everything. I feel like in my current company, we are not doing A/B testing, partly because we are not ready from a technical standpoint. It's just so much effort involved. We just not feel ready to start doing that at the moment. And also going back to the point, who should be responsible for it? I feel like also depending on the stage of the company and how big the company is and things like that.
Is it the role of product operations as well? So when I talk to people in product operations, they told me I help to make this data visible and to make sure that we have the best product practices. So is there a role for product operations in helping to get the company mature enough to run those experiments and then to help run them?
We don't really have a product operations person, so it's hard to tell.
It's very similar to what my product growth manager does, and it's being the one that decides and analyzes if the metrics that were tracked, if the metrics that we decided to use as indicators were the correct ones, and if they provided their results as positive or negative, and which one to decide on.
Yeah, it's interesting because this world that we live in as product managers and as UX designers and as product designers, etc., has changed so much. Well, it's basically invented in that time frame, the last 10 years or so. websites used to be the domain of someone who was technically competent enough to get it online. Then it became an artistic endeavor. Could you create cool Flash sites? And then now it's definitely becoming more of a scientific endeavor. And so I think that this notion of someone who controls data will actually spread out and be everyone being involved in that. PMs especially, probably the next 2 or 3 years will definitely be far more data driven.
So as a product manager, so I think, Iryna, you said that you don't have any product operations team. Sometimes we don't have any UX researchers. So there's lots of people that we don't have, and we have to do all of the work ourselves. So if we were to say, okay, we're ready, let's assume the organization is ready, we have the technical infrastructure, and we know what we want to test with A/B testing, would you be happy as a UX designer to own this, to run the experiment and then analyze the results? Is this something we can share with you in terms of responsibilities? Or would you think, and that's going back to what we said in the first round, about the scope of a UX designer, would you say, it's actually a bit outside of my remit?
My role is very broad. So on my side, yes, I would definitely share that responsibility with my PM. I would definitely also help him analyze it, maybe from my perspective, and then compare our perspectives to get the best result. But I think it depends, again, as we talk. I think you're going to win, and the maturity of the company, the role, and the people involved in it.
And I'm going to say no on this one. I think that it's like, if I have a certain amount of time to dedicate myself to X number of facets of the job, is it going to be better for me to invest that time early on in the process of some other user journey? Or is it going to be better for me to invest the time in working out whether that whole process worked in that particular case? And for me, it's kind of like a feedback or a metric. My hope is that the UX team would be so amazing that all of the A/B testing just confirms that the design worked because we'd already done the user journey and tested everything, right? Like, that's your dream. Oh, no, come back, your design was spot on. There's no improvement to be made. Obviously not realistic, but I think that if you're talking about where to spend resources, that's maybe not the best area for UX.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. But it's a shame you don't have any word associated to that, because otherwise you would win.
I sort of agree with Pamela on this, because I feel like this could be a shared thing as well. So it doesn't have to be only UX designers or PMs who are responsible for this. If you're working in a team and you're all interested in doing that, you could, team up and have a quick call once a week and analyze the results. So yeah, would be happy to share that with other teams.
To add up to that, I think it is a very good practice to get more ownership of what you're building, because you're also seeing how users are behaving with it, and it gives you the perspective that you need to make the corrections or iterations required or needed to make it the best product out there for them. So I like to be involved, and I've been involved multiple times in analyzing this type of things, because it gives me the perspective and the closure maybe that I need with the user on how they're behaving with the product.
Very sweet how you put your word perspective into it. Well done. I'm tempted to vote for it as well, because it's the name of a podcast. So, right. About suboptimal. So let's say the company is not mature enough to do A/B testing, and we also think this is a suboptimal way to validate a product decision. What would you do instead? So Hayden, you said, if I have some time, I would prefer to do something else instead. So what are the other methods that you would prioritize compared to A/B testing?
Personally, I'd rather spend all my time in an analytics tool just scouring how users are clicking, how long it's taking them, real nuts and bolts metrics that also a lot of companies don't do. But there's such a richness of interaction that you can get that doesn't necessarily compare one design or another, and different ways of presenting those things. So if I want to use a really quick example, if you've got a mascot for your product and you're trying to decide whether the mascot should be a superhero or the mascot should be a unicorn, you could A/B test that. You could put, the superhero in front of half of your people, and if they change it away, then okay, they weren't very happy with that. Or you could look at a flow where you invited the user to choose, and that is not an A/B test. That's a process or a flow where you're taking care of your clients and saying, hey, which of these two things do you prefer, or what font size do you prefer, or what's your color scheme? Are you colorblind? So I think there are different strategies for building that knowledge into a user journey, and I think that there are better ways to spend the time.
Yeah, I like the example about the different logos, because it's not, in that case, you're not only changing one variable. You're changing, yes, the logo that you choose, but also its colors. And you're also changing the meaning. Maybe a unicorn has a different meaning than something else. So there's so many variables, but you don't actually get what you need from that. You're going to make a decision, but you think that's a data-driven decision, but it's not. It's actually a wrong use of data. There's a paper, which I will share with the notes of this podcast, that was made years ago by leaders from like big tech companies, that includes Google and all this, about A/B testing. And in this paper, they say that you also, when you do A/B testing, you're also testing like the short term, like how do people react right now, but that doesn't mean it's going to drive behavior going forward. There may be a particular reason why they're acting like this. And I think the difference between A/B testing, which is limited in time, right now, this is what people are doing, but is changing the color of that button really going to have an impact in the long term compared to when you're looking at those tools and you see users, journeys live, and you see what they're actually doing, and you can see this over time. So it's much more valuable than A/B testing, I think.
Yeah, I also find it very valuable when you do user testing and you ask the users to go through a certain flow and they comment on their feelings and emotions and things like that. So I feel like that's even a step up into understanding the user game as well.
I agree with Hayden in terms of that. Depending on your bandwidth, you could invest your time in other types of practices or tools for research where you can also consider A/B testing, not as formal as an A/B test, but you could, try some things out. So for example, as you mentioned, the things of like tracking the user behavior, how they're moving. So for example, in my company, we use Full Story. So I don't know if you know that, but it's like you can review your user sessions and see hotspots, behaviors, rage clicks, other types of things, or like usability testing. I think there's a good moment also to A/B test stuff, and you can try some flows with one type of user and some others with the other, and it doesn't have to be a formal A/B test, but rather like talking to them and seeing how they behave with each one. Also like analytics tools. So we at my company right now, we use Indicative. It's like a very new tool, but it helps you. It's similar to Segment. I don't know if you know Segment, but it lets you track the user, step by step type of thing in the flows. And there's this other tool that I haven't used, but I've heard of a lot by many UX people, called Maze. I don't know if you also heard it, but it's like a tool that allows you to ask usability questions, and then you can also track and see recordings of the users behaving with the product. So all of this just to say that I think indeed you could invest your time in other types of tests and do more in one, I would say. Whereas A/B testing could be used mainly for maybe communication stuff, type of things like Iryna mentioned a while ago, of marketing stuff, maybe how you communicate your brand to the people. And also, as Hayden mentioned, inclusion, like people with disabilities, how can you improve that for them and make those alternatives for them?
That will sound a bit creepy, but I agree that I do love watching what the users are doing. So even through analytics, and I love those tools. I've never had it in my company, but where they record sessions of what the users are doing. Because if I take if I make the parallel with, when you ask a user to complete a task during a user research session, and they try to figure out how they're going to do that, I find this is one of the most insightful methods.
There's, of course, just to clarify for everyone hearing this, there's privacy stuff that, of course, is considered that you don't have to worry about. You're not being observed in everything that you do. So,
very good point indeed. So we have UX design team said perspectives, suboptimal, and PM team said unbiased, mature. Which one do you vote for, Hayden?
Your one, definitely, in this case. There are, roles dedicated to it. So I think it very much depends on where your company's at. I just haven't been fortunate enough, I guess, to be in an environment where so many roles are accounted for already, and A/B testing is just another of those roles.
Cool. Pamela?
I really want to go with mine, but I would be kind of like, no. So I'm gonna also vote for yours, Magali. It's what decides if you do it or not, and it proved today that many of us don't have the maturity to do the A/B testing. So yeah, yours.
Okay, I'll vote next. I think suboptimal is my preferred word because I thought mine was pretty good. But since we've discussed that actually A/B testing is one of the methods you can use, but it's not the grail of the methods, and it's not the one you should go for and you think you have to do it. Actually, there are other methods which require a bit less maturity from the company, but bring a lot more benefits. So I would say for me, actually, it makes me think that A/B testing may be suboptimal.
Cool. And I would go for maturity as well. Not because we have to win this round, but because I just like it. So
I think it's the first time I win.
yay! Like it.
Yes.
I'll invite you again. Right. Thank you. So if I try and summarize the key points, the first one is don't be ashamed if you don't have A/B testing in your company. The industry is not quite there yet. The second thing linked to my word is organizations need to be mature enough to implement this. So it may be that your organization is not at this stage yet, and that's fine. And it may take a lot of time. And even once you've brought in the tech stack to do this, it may be that it takes several months or even several years for your company to be fully utilizing A/B testing. The final takeaway from me is that actually, let's not worry about A/B testing that much. There are other methods which provide you with the information you need to make good design decisions. Thank you very much, everybody. So after the end of round 2, we've got 1 point for the UX design team and 1 point for the product team. It's the same as in the first roundtable. So there's a lot of tension for the third episode. And we will talk about, again, something linked to data, which is KPI. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it has enabled you to understand your stakeholder and inspired you to better work with them to make successful products. If so, please share the link with your friends and colleagues. And if you want to suggest some topics, some guests, if you have questions you'd like me to ask during the interviews, or if you have any feedback, you can write to me at magalipellissier@hotmail.fr.